the great White North, your destination for the iciest cold takes from the frozen wastelands of the North. I'm your host, Charles Constantine, and with me is NP. Say hello, NP.
Hello.
How's it going today?
Great. Just been doing some reading, playing a bit
Yeah,
with ChatGPT. I used ChatGPT to do a little bit of my job today. A very tedious part.
it sounds like it's coming in handy for the small tasks here and there.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, who knows how good it'll get. Right now, if you need to write something like a talented high schooler, you're covered. If you want to write something like a liberal middle manager, you're covered, which is actually just what I needed to do. Yeah,
I
it's
imagine you could use that to like write a bio for your LinkedIn profile or something
that would be
like the
brilliant.
real, how to get yourself into the real sterile like corporate speak spaces. That could just
Right.
clear your way, no problem.
Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that this is where it will stop or where it's limited to. From what I understand, it's actually quite capable of imitating a variety of styles if you give it the right prompts. Although it's funny that it does tend towards this sterile thing. But and I think the further iterations will have more like personality. You'll probably be able to choose personalities, and that'll be selectively applied flaws. Perhaps aggression, perhaps overly verbose. These kind of
Give
things.
it the give it the style of Thomas 777. It's the random capitalization.
Yes. Oh, I
Though
hope AI doesn't replace Thomas 777 because he's pretty dear to everyone.
I think I think it has too many restrictions on it, language restrictions to really imitate that whole deal.
Yes. Um,
The Go ahead.
yeah, the only way to pass a Turing test now is to say the N word. It's really funny.
Yeah, that is just absurd, honestly. The other thing that I saw with some of those chat GPT stuff is guys were filming their results using them for prompts on dating apps. So it was just, give me a response to X, Y, or Z profile, and with this style. And the guy was just like everyone like he's automatically getting responses. So he was saying it was
Yes.
very simple to offload the thinking of dating apps because things like that are kind of already people take an algorithmic approach to things like dating apps. Like it's like you
Well,
have to
how
do a
long,
certain.
since the women will have tools to assist them, there'll be look enhancements and filters, even maybe enhanced reality, like if everyone's got their Google glasses kind of thing on, and you'll have your virtual dating coach in your ear. And so it won't really be you. How long before you're just algorithmically assigned and you just both go meet in the bedroom? Like you don't say a word. Like why bother? The
It's
outcome's
funny.
inevitable.
It's funny because it's not quite one to one, but it's like, do you remember Demolition Man?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Where they had
and that's exactly
yeah,
how they do it in Brave New World too. Incidentally,
right. Now, I'm not saying it's going to turn like I think a lot of this has a cap on what people actually stop at, but at this point, a lot of the space that's facilitated through those sorts of technological uh, media spaces and especially algorithmically driven technologies and softwares, those definitely are just going to be taken over, I think, by this AI approach.
yeah, definitely. The algorithm being a fixed or hard to mutate, fixed like state machine input output versus neural net. The advantage of the neural net is imperfection. I think this is always worth remembering. I think one of the first uses of fuzzy logic I ever heard implemented popularly was making the orcs in the Lord of the Ring movies. They used the same principles series of weighted nodes and some RNG and to derive all the physical characteristics of the orcs, and then procedurally generated them. Not except some main characters. And they, if perfection means everything's the same, ultimately, like there's a perfect platonic ideal form of an orc that an algorithm would spit out every time. You need something as dumb as a human to give it any personality or distinction. So AI is trending towards humanness, which is flawedness, which should cut down on its effectiveness at the same time.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do to emulate the human error, because I think human error can be really unique. Like it's hard. It would. I couldn't imagine, and maybe they could prove me wrong, but just coding in the real simple flaws that you make, like forgetting where you put your phone and it's literally in your pocket, like something as dumb as that. How
Well,
would you?
here's the thing: is that would be like very easy to put in, but we're very. It's very hard to trick people about patterns. We recognize patterns very easily. So in video games, what you're going to do when you're generating a map is to generate noise. But unless your noise algorithm's like somehow perfectly scattered and tuned, people are going to look at this map you've generated and they're going to be like, oh, I can almost see the algorithm. I can see like the crosses, the chunks, and where like the river nodes meet. So they'll try and put the flaws in, but the distribution and use of flaws will itself be so perfect as to give it away. They ultimately will have to generate, like to use the, we do have the noise algorithms to the point that they're indecipherable from, nature, say. No, okay. I don't think this will be too much of a hurdle for them, but it will mean that their AIs have personalities, and that itself is interesting.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what there's less fear and more curiosity for what this is
It's
coming. I think we have a lot in the docket today that we will be exploring more of this.
yes.
But before we get into it too much, let's go back to the real world for just a second. And I was looking at this NDP speech at the House. We'll leave the link in the description if you guys want to check out the video. But basically, it was this politician demanding that the Conservative Party condemn the comments made by Tucker Carlson surrounding January 6th. And I mean, there's almost not much to say on that. It's just, what does it even mean to be a Canadian politician? You're complaining about American news anchor for comments about something that happened 2 years ago in another country that had almost zero bearing on anything that any day-to-day
Tongue-in-cheek comments, no less.
Yeah. So it's
yeah.
like, if this is the most pressing issue for an opposition party in the government to demand other politicians deal with, then what really is their job? It's just
well, are
incoherent.
they asking? Is this some sort of casus belli to form some sort of grievance against the United States to maybe get a trade offer or something? Is there any charitable donation we can give it?
And that's the thing, and it's not like there's anything like that being advocated for in the speech. It was
Are they hoping to degrade our relations with the United States over this comment?
Well, not even that. It's entirely rhetoric aimed at just condemning, like trying to get, basically, this guy wants to get a cheap pot shot at the Conservative Party and play up the intra-party politics.
But Tucker Carlson's not in the Conservative Party.
Yeah, but he wants to get the Conservative Party of Canada to condemn them, and because they haven't, made
Oh,
some official condemnation, then they're pulling that up as a point of attack.
yeah. So it's the usual liberal trick. Well, I guess everyone. It's just disgusting. Uh, it's so pathetic. It's just so petty and pathetic.
Yeah,
But it is the exact kind of petty and pathetic trick that keeps the left winning forever. Because the conservatives probably will be like, yeah, we condemn comments
no,
made
they
by
didn't.
no.
If you watch the video, they just say they all object to put like tries to put a motion
Okay.
forward, I think, and then they all just reject it. He actually looks really silly at the end of all that. I mean, he looks silly
Oh,
in the
good.
first place, but the point is, like, this is what obviously we talk about on the show all the time, and we've referenced George Grant in this, and just the American cultural colonization to the point where your politicians don't even talk about dealing with issues within your own country. They're more worried about, you know, irrelevant issues in America. That not even American politicians are still going, like, they are, but they're not trying to enforce condemnation on each other at this current moment. That was their thing 2 years ago. Like,
Yeah. Well, it's because
how many
it's
years out do you have to be?
so. Do you do you buy kind of the explanation that leftism or this progressivism is the religion of um, well, the GAE or ZOG or whatever?
Well, I don't really think it's so. I think focusing too much on it being a leftism thing or progressivism, I think that misses the the core characteristic. I think when we talked about George Grant and his essays on the technology and society, when he pointed out that yes, religion, as in the like binding force, every state, every people need a binding force. So every state, they all need a religion, and so he says the role of the religion is liberal democracy, and they teach democracy is the highest ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and again, it's specifically the liberal definition
Yeah,
of
the
democracy.
NRX guys call it
Now,
universalism, but I think that's a bit silly.
kind
But
of dumb. Almost everything is universalist. Like,
yeah,
but the thing is you have one group that more effectively advocates for it, and you could say that's the modern left because they just take it to its logical conclusion in each step. So there's better adherence to that notion of liberal democracy and the negative freedom. We need to completely remove all restraints so that there's nothing preventing us from acting in a given direction. Whereas the conservatives, well, very basic talking points, they're just driving on speed limit. They have a they have a notion of liberal democracy that's more aligns with something they conceive of as 100 years ago or 150 years ago, maybe.
mm-hmm.
Um, but even they accept a lot of the premises. So it's not so much leftism itself; it's that religion of liberal democracy itself, and it's just two
That is what I
sides.
was driving at. Yeah. But so
Okay,
if you
yeah,
buy the religious explanation, then what this guy is doing isn't so much politics as like a ritual of like affirmation, like a liturgy of sorts, like condemning Satan on a pulpit.
yeah. I mean, it would be close to that, but not even. It's yeah. There's something to that. There's something that where he's pointing towards here's the bad, and we need to make sure that we are on guard for the bad always. But at the same time, it's also just he's angling for his position within the political structure and demonstrating that he doesn't actually care about the issues of the Canadian people in the process.
Right.
I think that's a good point to drive home is, if you're listening and you have people that are invested in this too much, just say, hey, look at what these people are arguing over on the job. Like, this is supposed to be their job and this is what they argue over.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Don't we have like a healthcare crisis right now? Like, I'm sure they got
Yeah.
stuff to be doing.
Yeah,
If you
there's
got
a
time to
lot.
lean, you got time to clean. NDP, eh? Um,
Yeah, like I don't expect them to be solving every issue nonstop. It's unrealistic. But if you're going to be talking about issues, it better be something relevant to our own country, right?
yeah. Yes, I dare say. And if you're going to talk about like American cultural issues that might have bearing on our country, then I wouldn't start with a 2-year-old Tucker Carlson clip. You absolute maroons.
Just goofballs,
Just
silly,
yeah,
silly Billy.
some real goofs. Um, yeah. Well, there's some more insidious propaganda coming out of the States right now. You were showing me this.
Oh yeah, yeah. We were taking a look at the. I guess you could call her the propaganda girl,
The PSYOP
uh,
girl?
psyop girl. There is a. I guess this is a U.S. military recruitment op, and I think I almost feel bad talking about it because I feel like it's giving it more exposure than it deserves. But it's a very interesting phenomenon and something to learn from. I think this girl is called Haley Luan, something like that. Um, and she presents as a typical e-girl,
What's
right?
an e-girl, Charles?
Basically, you're online, overly online, uh, female.
Oh,
I don't really know what else you
well,
like. It's like the cat ears and the
but is it this? This is my question as an old guy. Is it always an OnlyFans thing, or like a sexual thing, or is it
no.
no?
It's a attention thing
Hmm.
for sure.
Is
And
it
it's
isn't it aesthetic like goth? Like you got goths, you got e-girls.
yeah, I would say it's more of an aesthetic because, like I was saying, like a lot of them do the cat ear, the anime kind of posting stuff, the meme culture. They're tapped into that, and then they put themselves into the mix too, right? So it's not just detached meaning;
Okay,
they're involved in the meme themselves,
okay.
oftentimes. And you get a combination of ones that are sexualized, but also ones that are kind of just meme, just for the
You mean
meme.
they involve themselves in the memes? Do you mean that in the sense that it's like if one day you saw in the CBC that NP had like rushed onto Parliament floor, or do you mean that they put their own faces on the memes?
Well, it's less about directly inputting themselves into the memes. So they do this, and this psyop girl, she does this. Um, but it's more so they in their posting they become the center of attention, right?
Right.
So it's like the meme is always relevant to their personal situation. Now this again, not every single case, but if you go to any other big meme page, right? It's usually
Hmm.
just a guy posting the meme, and they're not
Oh,
investing themselves in
okay.
it,
So I
right?
go to potassium nitrate pilled, my favorite Telegram meme
Yes,
page, and he's got just memes from all over. There'll be some schizo memes, some cat pictures, that kind of thing. And it's really got nothing to do with him except that he picked him out. But you're saying that if I go to e-girl deluxe whatever Belle Delphine or whatever paid Telegram page is going to have her in all the memes, or they'll be like referential to her or whatever.
oftentimes yes.
Okay.
So I think that plays a role in e-girl, in an aspect of the e-girl phenomenon, and then um, yeah, then they just have their e-girl, like the look with the long eyelashes and the I don't know enough about makeup to. There's like a certain glow that they put on their makeup, I guess. Once you see, it's like one of those things you just see and like that's an e-girl.
Okay.
And if you
I
look at this girl, like she hits those marks,
I
right?
think I do know the look from like shared TikTok videos and things like this.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So, anyways, the point is that she's aping this style that's emerged from people interacting online, right? There's a whole meme culture, and she's again appropriating the e-girl style because people are invested in that, especially young, I'd say more Zoomer men online are extremely invested in that. But now, in this particular instance, it's propaganda for the government, for the military recruitment. She does a lot of these videos in her military gear. She does them in, it's in tanks, it's with weapons in her hand, um, and then it's self-referential, it's self-aware. So it says this is propaganda. In this one, I'll post it in the description. In this one, they flash images on screen. There's one as she's dancing about on the video. One of the things that's flashed on screen is in North Korea, people are forced to listen to propaganda. In the USA, people do it willingly. And then it even has a CNN logo in the mix in that quote. And then there's one thing where it says background information. This is one example from the Russian propaganda campaign used to destabilize the U.S. in 2016 presidential election, as documented by the U.S. Senate Select Subcommittee on Intelligence. The purpose of these posts was to undermine public trust in journalism. Technique used to attack opponents. This is propaganda because it's a type of name calling that promotes disrespect and hatred for an important part of American culture that is needed for democracy to function. So it's like calling out the attacks on CNN as Russian propaganda, basically, and then it's referenced like it's several layers of like this self awareness, calling out the very propaganda that its own system engages in, and like you see where I'm going, right?
yes, I do. And I do remember the one part of the clip that even just says, "You are not immune to propaganda."
Right,
Which is a
and that
common
is
catchphrase from our side to like warn everybody, and
right.
but now being used by the propagandists,
So
rubbing it in the
exactly,
face.
yes, and yeah, so it is doing the name calling to you. So it's sort of reappropriating what you would call us calling something like CNN propaganda, being aware of the mass propaganda of the United States. This is now attacking the viewer with the same information that the viewer once attacked the mass media. And then, like you pointed out, it's appropriating the meme language that often runs in our circles or in meme culture in general. I think, people call things, it glows, right?
Yep.
Glow is what you use to
Glowies.
recognize the Fed. Yep.
Yep.
And then I think in one of her videos, she said something along the lines of like, what if it is the best glow job you ever had? And so now it's using that meme language and then
Mm-hmm.
sexualizing it with her own appearance, her own self. Because like she again in this one, she's in uh, bikinis, scantily clad clothing, mixed with her guns and everything. That's all model shoots, and it's using the fried what would you call that again? My
You mean the deep
The hard
fried meat?
fried filter, deep
Yeah.
fried filter,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's got that deep fried filter. So it's all these levels of referential. Uh,
Okay. So, Charles, to start examining this, we have to go like way back. And I don't know. Have you ever seen
hmm,
Century of the Self, the Adam Curtis
yes,
documentary?
yeah, yeah,
So you're, and our audience probably has too. And if not, then they're almost certainly familiar with Freud and Bernays and the repercussions since then. Bernays was the first guy to successfully use sexuality. Of course, it had to be very subliminal back then in creating the link, like false desires between products and the target consumers. That has been in an arms race with our own skepticism, but one we had largely lost until, say, the dawn of the internet, where they had pretty much managed to insinuate advertising into every, not only the mainstream culture, but into every offshoot culture, counterculture, and other derivative. In 2016, we kind of exited that mass media vertigo and entered a new phase where reality once again shifted, because now we not only were immersed in this hyper reality of fake desire, but now we knew it. There's no choice but to be self-aware, because all propaganda is instantly spotted as such. There's no point to hiding it. You could take uh, you could say they're rubbing it in our faces, and kind of that we have no choice but to accept it, and that they're kind of trying to saying haha. But on the other hand, we also they have no choice but that we know that it is propaganda. So I suppose they ask themselves the question, what do we do given this landscape? How do we appeal to people who think everything is a glow job? Ugh. And that'll be the last time you hear me say that term on this show. The answer is what's in front of you. That's the next evolution. How effective it'll be, I don't know. How effective do you think it'll be?
Well, for me, when I'm looking at this, it's easy to sort of dismiss it as silly and goofy and just move on. Like it's an object of fascination for us, for sure. But again, who, from our perspective, whatever. But I can see from the perspective of young men who are already uh, hyper engaged. They have this engagement with this hyper reality since birth. Essentially, most of these young men are coming up, are going to be seeing this for the first time, and it's going to be referencing the culture that they've already been immersed in their whole life. And then, it suddenly looks like this institution is pushing the same sort of experience that they go through, and they can associate with it. And despite it being self-referential, self-aware, and admitting it, I can see that target might buy into this and jump on board, right? Because again,
It's not actually wholly different than what they did with the MTV stuff in the grunge era. Kurt Cobain
yes,
was exceedingly self-aware, and it was making fun of him. He was constantly making fun of himself being on MTV, and that he was a corporate sellout. It had those layers of irony baked in. I think maybe they've just realized that we've kind of cycled around to that kind of detached, disenfranchised. What's the word I'm looking for? Whatever. That kind of attitude. Gen Z's more like Gen X in attitude.
you mean apathetic?
There's a word that means you're not attached to something. Disaffected. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Well, because you have to think in relation to the previous propaganda approaches. So if you look at, well, what's the last major military recruitment commercial that you can think of?
Yeah, I do remember this because they actually did have some military recruitment videos at the beginning of this war last year, and
Yeah,
they were they had actually moved away from diversity a little bit. It's like they couldn't afford to push it quite so hard in peacetime. I think there was some diversity kind of ads too, but there was some I saw that actually just made the military look like fun. Like you'd be playing with drones and you'd be jumping out of helicopters and going through ships, and it was all done with it looked like Avatar, but you get to be in the mech suit and you get to pilot the drone. And that's a very traditional approach.
yeah, because when I look at that kind of thing, I can understand why that might be appealing for a young man that is actively looking for adventure, right? And we should contrast that. Do you remember that? I think it was a cartoon commercial for military recruitment. It was lesbian couple thing. Do you remember that one?
I remember the reaction. I don't remember the ad itself.
There was yeah, it's basically a military recruitment commercial where it was, you can be your strong, independent self regardless of who you are, and it was a lesbian with, I think it might have had a racially ambiguous partner, and going through the whole military thing and look at, I'm actually a real person that made it through the military. That was what was before. And then this resurgent recently, yeah, like you said, then there's the more traditional approach of look at this action and fun. So obviously the diversity one that's not really appealing to the demographic that they need to recruit for the military.
Yeah.
The more traditional approach, that might appeal to a guy looking for adventure already who is maybe a little older, closer to 30s or in their 30s. But again, that person already has to be actively looking. Whereas this approach now, this can hit anyone at any time, whether or not they're looking for the adventure. And it's the aspect of having the capacity to immerse itself almost seamlessly into the landscape of the current internet meme culture. I think that's what makes this so much more advanced and effective. Because you have on top of this, you have the other side of the
Yes.
sex appeal,
The only
the e-girl sex appeal,
yes,
and then the having this hip almost. There's an aspect of coolness to it where, yeah, we get you. We're on the same wavelength as you. So if you hop in to our institution, you're not going to feel like an outsider.
let's not forget another factor. I think they might have spent a good chunk of their recruitment budget in the like aughts and tens on funding first-person shooters. And they're hoping
Yeah, I
to
think
recruit boys through first-person shooters. I'm not sure if they funded mainstream ones like Call of Duty and stuff, or if they just made their own. There's one at least that was completely funded by them. I suspect they kind of just paid other people to do it after. But I think they probably didn't get their money's worth on that. Yeah, I think probably not very. Or they'd still just be doing that.
Just like the closest parallel would be, Guitar Hero or Rock Band.
Yeah.
How many people that played those games went on to actually learning instruments? I almost know zero people that played that and then decided to take up the actual instruments after they were bored with it.
Yes.
They almost exclusively stuck to that
and
because it's your dopamine hit.
So we can see the mistake they made. They failed to differentiate hyper-reality from reality. In fact, after you've played Guitar Hero and stood on stage in front of all those howling pixels and played Freebird perfect S+ score, I forget how they rated, and I've never played Guitar Hero.
I think it's like 5 stars.
5-star score, everyone howling. How can you just go and try and learn Smoke on the Water in your room in your little pocket amp?
Yeah, you go back to sucking immediately.
Exactly. Hyperreality is more real than real. You can't present it first and then expect them to go do the real thing.
So that's where this becomes a more effective, I would imagine. I guess we're yet to see the fruits of this, but it's tough to deal with because you see a lot of response videos to this where you have a guy, he'll put on the first 10 seconds of this girl's propaganda videos, and then it'll be the guy like snapping his fingers saying, wake up, that's propaganda, you're watching propaganda, it's not real, you're not going to meet her if you go there. But that sort of posting in itself just feeds back into the same media hype that it's trying to generate.
Somewhat. I do think it's good. I think it's educational. I think it's good. I won't put it down. I wouldn't show so much as the first 10 seconds. That's you're feeding it back too much. Here's what I'd recommend as a general strategy. Instead of doing this to all of her videos, pick one every month, single it out, and do it to that one. Also, don't look back. Maybe mock her simps. Do another anti-white knight crusade. Mock the simps. Mock the coomers.
This is where it gets tricky though, because in a lot of this, the engagement drives the notoriety. That's how social media works, and that's why something like this, its intention to be self-referential and to mock the viewer in the process, plays on two sides. It plays on the side of the people that know and want, have the desire to speak out and call it out. Because
Hmm.
this is some this these propaganda videos, they're asking you to call it out. They're saying, "Hey, look," like they're giving you a smug smile and saying, give me a, uh, beat me down." Like it's telling you, like, call me out for this,
Hmm.
and then it plays the other side of the people that are sort of unsuspecting, um, and even bullying the people that are unsuspecting and simping for it, for
Right.
example. That gives it more content to feed into,
Sure.
because then it takes that, though the bullying. I could probably, like, I guarantee you, I can almost guarantee you, you'll see in our videos that eventually you'll see people, people calling them out will be fed back into the same propaganda approach, and
Sure. You make
have
the
a
haters
like
part of the
the
show.
ironic mocking of this, and then yeah, it will be. So that's the trick with this,
So
is
ignoring it is the best thing.
which is the opposite of what we're doing, which is why it makes it so tough.
Let's maybe not link it below. Just believe us that it exists. I'll tell you how it ends.
Yeah,
She slathers herself down in honey in a yellow bikini
don't even. Yeah,
with the out of and it says honey pot, and it's a play
yeah.
on words because it's a honey pot, you know. Um, and then she gets
So
like
it's like a
mad at herself for what she's doing and walks off set.
yeah, it's like a fourth wall break, but it's also
But
ironic
honestly, if you feel,
and acting.
if from that description there you feel compelled to go hunt it down and look at it, just go to the old hub and don't go looking for
No,
explicit. Like
no,
don't even
don't.
do that. But like better than
What
going
the
to look
hell?
at
Don't listen
military.
to anyone.
I'm saying as a preference to going and looking up straight up recruitment propaganda.
No, don't do any of that.
Well, don't do that either. Of course, I'm just saying you'd be
It's
better off.
the thing is the important thing is to be recognizing the new, um, iterations of this propaganda warfare, because we keep running back and forth between, you have the sophistication of the memes of our sphere being way too incomprehensible for the average boomer to even keep up with. I mean, we've joked about this before, where how would you even comprehend some of the, like, even the memes from 5 6 years ago?
You mean dinosaur times?
There's, again, the deep fried E over A. Yeah, it's old. Like, you have that there's that famous picture of Lord Farquaad from Shrek, and
Mm-hmm.
deep fried, it has a big letter E over it, and then it
Yes.
has Markiplier, the YouTuber's face, photoshopped over Farquaad. Like, how would you can't even explain that, and that thing's like 5 to 8 years old at this point. How would you even explain that? The sophistication is way beyond. So we're way ahead, where we were way ahead, and then now they're paying Zoomers who get the meme culture, that have been immersed in it themselves, to do the work for them. Because it's not like she's taking a script from some old boomers in the military industrial complex. As far as I can understand, she comes up with a lot of this stuff herself,
I'd imagine
based on
so.
the trends. So, part of the trick here is, how do you stay a step ahead of all of this?
Yeah, well,
Because
okay,
it's
I'll
not
tell
just
you
for
the next
you.
step that's coming. Bespoke e-girl recruitment propaganda. It won't just be an e-girl, it'll be an e-girl specifically made to fit your dream girl.
That that was actually very
That's
possible,
like tomorrow. That's coming, like that's right around the bend.
because I think that's part of uh, the hype with OnlyFans. Guys aren't just paying it because they're coomers. I mean, that's always part of it, but they pay for that over, free pornography, because they're looking for a social intimacy that they can get in their personal lives, and they can pay to get the specific intimacy that they want
Right.
from those girls. So
Okay.
that's a major aspect that people are looking
Okay.
towards.
But there's a weak point in there, in that maybe not all the OnlyFans girls are going to be willing to be white feather girls, especially the ones from Russia. I think what's probably going to happen is these new AI generated girls. are going to kind of take over a lot of that sphere, which
Yeah,
is
and I think
that
that
might be positive in some ways, in that it means that women won't occupy it, real flesh and blood women.
that's a strong possibility because we were talking about this advent of these AI girls, and you can, if you're internet savvy enough, you can tell the difference. But the average person that doesn't have the capacity to
Oh,
tell the
and
difference
that's gonna
is
no,
just
no.
gonna.
You could tell the difference because it was the first ones. By probably now they're making better ones that are more indetectable.
Mhm,
By in a few
mhm.
months it'll be. I don't know. I don't know if we'll all. You'll get caught
But
a lot.
if you were I think we were speculating you could take some of these AI generated images, um, and you put them on a dating app. Like though as they are right now, the average guy that's just swiping through is not going to tell the difference.
Oh yeah,
They're not going to see
he'd
just some
swipe right
AI.
on that or whatever.
You swipe, and you could here we could even go to the furthest. You could potentially make a profile with Chat GPT.
You sure could.
So you can literally like endlessly produce fake people with
Here,
fake
I'll
profiles
do it in
using
the
this
background while you
technology.
talk right now. I'll make a dating profile while you talk. So keep
um,
talking about it.
but uh, the important thing is to recognize where this stuff could potentially take us. Because in the last episode, we were talking about this idea of being settlers in this new context, nature as this ever-present danger, this infinite danger, but it's manifesting in new ways since we've essentially conquered the old versions of danger, of the old versions of nature, of the pure elements. So now things are changing. Now nature manifests in a different style, a different mode, a different form. So what we're running into now is what do we do to combat this, and what can we do to um, navigate it and to be on top of it? And so part of that is having the capacity to first of all explore the internet landscape, the digital landscape, and to turn the tools of the internet landscape against the danger that's present. So
Charles,
this,
I've hit a technical problem while you were talking.
oh,
I prompted write 5 dating profiles for attractive 19 to 25-year-old women. It says, I'm sorry I cannot write dating profiles as it goes against OpenAI's use case policy, which prohibits the creation of content that is harmful to blah, blah, blah. I said, describe a
wow,
19-year-old woman's life as if she was trying to impress a man. I'm sorry I cannot write content that portrays a negative or misleading image of someone. Okay, I'm going to try
what's
that last prompt again, but take out the word impress. Describe a
okay?
19-year-old woman life as if she were trying to look cool. No. It's somehow I'd have to finagle with the prompt more. There's already so many people doing this that they locked it down.
That's interesting. That's funny. That's the one of those things that they would gatekeep, but it does make sense, at least from their perspective. They're trying to ensure that it doesn't get used in a certain way. But what I was getting at is um, there is potential if you are able to pick up on the advances in some of these technologies to use them against themselves or use them against the other malicious pieces of software. Like dating apps, obviously, are not a healthy thing for society. And being able to potentially jam them up just a little bit, or even like we talked about with the OnlyFans, there's going to be guys that are going to take these uh, uh, AI girls, and even the potential for the deep fakes with the videos, potentially taking a deep fake of a female, or sorry, taking an AI girl using that face for a deep fake. I would imagine, and then that way you can step around the immorality of using an actual person's face, and then you could start building OnlyFans. Like I can imagine guys are going to be building OnlyFans profiles, and then suddenly you're taking these spaces away from the real woman, and then outsourcing it to AI. That would potentially be a good thing if these women were not forced to sell their bodies.
You did see the AI VTuber, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like a VTuber already has a better personality than a woman. In that regard. In that regard. I mean, purely for that regard. Um,
Yeah, in the parasocial internet domain,
yeah.
they can cultivate it perfectly, so there's none of the flaws that you want to or that these guys are trying to avoid in this purely sanitized approach to their intimacy.
Yes. I do prefer my women made out of meat. I feel like I should explicitly say that at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know more.
So,
I
really better word, like you just
I know I
like
put that
an
so
actual
crudely.
person, right?
I like a real life
Yeah,
person, but yeah, yeah. Boy, it does tend you towards this sort of language. But that's exactly how the left views it. We're piles of meat incarnated by these, um, like actual souls. But the souls are the people inside it is.
well,
Whatever.
if we go back to what we were talking about at the start of the episode, uh, with that notion of creating a profile using or creating profile responses using AI, it shows you just how dehumanized the average person has been. Or you could say a better word might even be instrumentalized. Because when you're on those apps trying to play the algorithm to get maximum exposure, because the average person on those apps is thinking, well, if I want to get the best or if I want to get the ideal person, I need to have the maximum exposure so that I don't miss any potential good matches. So you play the algorithm, but in doing so, you conform yourself, you instrumentalize yourself to the needs of the algorithm, not the needs of yourself. But you have to do that, otherwise you don't get the exposure you need to meet someone. And then you always approach the initial contact in a sort of according to a specific set of rules. They're
Yeah.
unsaid, but there's certain things that you say to get a response, but there's certain things you don't say. Like you can't just say, hey. You have to have a cultivated messaging in your approach that triggers. Like you're playing. It's like you're playing a game. Like you're like, I need to trigger A response. I can't trigger C response.
Right.
And so it's very easy for AI to replace that when we've instrumentalized ourselves to the extent that we're just playing these algorithmic games.
Check this out, Charles. I made that gene editing little poll. I don't know why. I was just thinking of Gattaca, which is a cool movie and scary, and that might be around the corner too. But someone pointed out that the traits I'd picked for this Superman were really like to maximize female sexual preference. And I was like, well, isn't that what natural selection does too? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh. So I read between the lines. I think what he was driving at is Christian marriage is a like counter-natural game that lets us escape the instrumentalization of female desire, and how that would conform. That's what allows us to take on more variety of good qualities and virtues and be selected on by virtue rather than by maybe just height.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at that. And I think driving along the same lines that you're pointing at there, those notions of virtue that kind of sit outside of that instrumentalization of the human, those are the characteristics that can't necessarily be matched. That's not something you can fit into an algorithm. Like, how, even simple thing, dating app. How would you gear a profile for virtue?
I wouldn't.
And if you tried to, you would fail in that environment. But
Maybe I
that's a
will
higher
try.
ideal.
I'll say I have a 240 follower Telegram account for white nationalism, and I think that's my most virtuous quality right now. Um, and I'll see how many matches I get.
That's not a virtue. I don't know, like
Okay, and what's
Aristotelian,
a
like
virtue?
the little, well, you could say like humility, for example,
Ah, well, like if I had it.
or prudence. Like,
Okay.
how would you show prudence in
I,
a dating
I
profile
guess
in a genuine sense?
step one to this plan is I should acquire some virtues.
Yeah, cart before the horse.
Uh, oh well. Um, yeah, I'd be very curious. I mean, I guess it's not like not virtuous to be good looking and tall and whatever, rich. It's just, it's also not necessarily virtuous.
Well, the difference again, if you're reading a sort of you're taking an approach like Plato or Aristotle, or even in the Christian sense, it's not bad in itself. It's just some of those qualities can lend you um, to be what's the word? I'm blanking. To be not.
And then it cuts out. Poor Charles.
It's not
He's going
some of
robot
those
mode.
qualities. No, I got it. I'm back. Right, I'm
You're
back.
back now.
Basically what I'm saying is some of those qualities can lend you towards certain vices. So you
Mm,
might be rich and then you become avaricious. It's that excess money gives you the vice of avarice, and you hoard your money, or you become prideful in yourself because you're taller
hmm
or you're stronger. And instead of using those qualities, again, it depends on some of the qualities themselves. It's how they're applied in the world. If you're tall and strong and you beat down people that you find weaker than you, well, that's not virtuous, right? You're using that to your personal gain instead of being charitable and like pulling people up, right? It's the simplest version is you have that story of weak guy scared of Chad making fun of him in the gym, but then the Chad just comes and helps him. Like, here's
Right.
how you get strong like me. That's the approach. Like, that's why the good is in helping others, not in glorifying yourself.
That makes me want to watch that classic alt right meme from like 2015 again. The cartoon, you know the one?
Maybe
It's got a good soundtrack. Whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about.
it's probably.
Let's see. Well, so we've dealt with e-girl psyops. We've dealt with fake AI girls. We've dealt with Chat GPT not delivering on my gag because it saw me coming. Uh, what else should we talk about
Well, if
today?
we wanted to expand on that idea, I've already touched on it a little bit on this episode, but that idea of being a settler facing down
Yeah,
danger that's presented by nature, I figured it might be good just to touch on what what that nature looks like in our current context, because you have to know what it is to combat it,
right.
or to navigate it at the very least.
So I think we're gonna let me lay down then the world as it is, the terrain. I think we agree we're kind of in the singularity now, where or have been even since electrical communication was invented, and so information moves faster than us, so that we can't control it. You could spend all day reading about developments, and you'd never be on top of it enough. Like you're a passenger on the technological ride. The technological tendencies guide human affairs, not vice versa. So we're left on an ocean of information. Like the information, the internet, the hyperworld is terrain. It's nature. It's not something. This is a recap of last episode. It's not something that quit thinking of it as light being beamed at you and think of it as an ocean you're sailing a ship on. We agree on that, I think, from last episode.
Yep.
That's where we got to start. So, tell us more about being a settler.
So in this terrain, I guess you could call it the ocean, or I think you had a word before we started the show. You had a good word. I'm trying to remember what you had called it. Not something like digital landscape.
Oh. It'll come back to me.
If it comes back, it comes back. But we'll call it the digital landscape for now. You know, instead of being it being endless forests of uncharted territory, you know, streams and rivers flowing from one section to the other, and you know, the unknown inhabitants that you make contact with, not knowing whether they're going to be friendly or hostile on first sight. Instead of all that, that's very concrete. We have to figure out what we're facing now in this current digital landscape, and I think a lot of what we talked about in this episode is a good example. So you have these digital psyops, these meme warfares, where everyone's trying to capture your attention at any given moment through the screen, through their pushing their particular ideology, their memes, their you have just a wide variety of that, and then you have different software devices. So like the dating apps, the OnlyFans, the pornography, these are all aspects that I would call nature acting on your primal desires, your lusts, right? They're trying to stimulate vices to capture your attention, pull you away from conquering the terrain, I would say. And so the danger isn't this physical, your life's at threat at any given moment, like it is if you're, you know, out trying to trap a beaver. Instead, it's your attention is always being called out for particular reasons, whether it's, like we said, the OnlyFans girls, or whether it's someone trying to sell you something, like the Andrew Tate would be another example. These sorts of influencers trying to capture your attention to sell things to you. So these are the first couple things that come to mind.
Yeah, it's spiritual danger, you might call it. But info hazards would be a more technical way, but it is spiritual danger ultimately.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's where they're hitting on you most.
See, it's not an information war. That's like saying that a ship battle is a water fight. It is a spiritual war. It is a like force of will and spirits that are clash.
Yeah, and then within all that, you have these varying ideologies. So there's like the anti-racism stuff and the LGBTQ stuff, and that's always trying to capture people's minds,
right?
And direct them towards particular ends.
I've been calling that whole complex right now, like that whole meme. I've been calling it the cut your own cock off ray, to put it crudely. But I like looking at it like a weapon. Like all of progressive liberalism, neoliberalism, is a weapon designed to get us to neuter ourselves. Imagine that the U.S. government invented a weapon they could shoot in the trenches, and it would make all the soldiers in that enemy trench cut their own cocks off. That's what trannies are like. Mm-hmm. And civnets.
Because if you're thinking in the spiritual context, so let's say you're a religious person, and if there's people trying to convince you to, like the grooming stuff, perfect example. People grooming online in Discord chats. We hear about this all the time. Tranny grooming, Discord chats. If you're someone, a religious person, you could be a Muslim or a Christian. If they're doing that to your kids, that is spiritual warfare. They're pulling your kids away. They're leading them down a path that is contrary to your spiritual devotion. So these are the kind of pitfalls that as a settler you have to figure out how to get around, how to navigate, instead of navigating the stream, the river, to get your family safely to the other side so that you can start up your town. Well, now you have to make sure your kids can get through without being groomed by some strange perverts online.
Yes. The hazards are like, there's nothing, no wonder everyone's on the internet, because there's really nothing quite so interesting going on. It is where all the hazards are. I mean, we know which neighborhoods to stay out of. We know which woods have which bears, and even there, they're like controlled. It's really only the internet where any true, frontier remains. So here we are. Do you think a lot of people then say we kind of have just a moral obligation to stay off of it? If the frontier is where the danger is, and this danger is spiritual, then just stay away from the danger.
Well, that doesn't really make much sense to me. Because in an ideal world, yeah, you wouldn't have to interact with any of this stuff. But the internet is here to stay. Like, no one's shutting this thing off, and these social media apps are here to stay. It's a question about how much exposure you're willing to give yourself. And I think it can be very easy to develop the social media addiction in itself. So not even considering all the hazards that appear within the landscape, but the landscape itself is that addictive presence, the dopamine hits. So there's an argument to be made about learning how to discipline yourself, and maybe you do have to shut it off every once in a while. But the people that are off the internet, out of the picture, they're open to being exploited at some point down the line. Like we just were speaking of in this episode, all of these different things, the AI girls and the propaganda. You might save yourself by not being exposed to it, and you might live probably a healthy life, but you still have to use the internet. It's not like you can, unless you go completely off grid and you're already self-sustainable, you have to use it. Like, you have to. Even if you don't use social media, you're using the internet.
Yes.
So what we've seen is things have been more integrated. There's less and less distinction between just running a business offline and because even to run a business, now you need social media for promotion, for advertising. So
right.
At a certain point, you don't necessarily need to be engaged in it at the forefront of the frontier, trying to uncover things as you go. But you need to be in the mix enough to understand the pitfalls.
Right. You got to be able to tell when your son's getting shot by the cut your own cock off ray.
Yeah. Like even if you're, the 20th wagon train, going across America, you still need to learn about what the guys in the first wagon train had to go through so that you make your journey safely. Because, at a certain point, you might have to make that journey. And that's where I think a lot of people miss the mark. And that's why boomers are never going to quite get it, because they already made, like, they're already done their aspect of things. They've already done their section of life, right?
I have an amazing hot take I've been sitting on for like 1,000 years that applies to this exactly. We're talking about, you want to be aware of what's going on the internet? This is why you have to watch what Chris Chan is doing. Because Chris Chan is like the absolute canary in the coal mine. Whatever Chris Chan is doing is whatever will be like normal on the internet in 2 years among the biggest freaks. He did it with bronies. He did it with trannies. He did it with, I can't think of what else. Lol cows.
That's a good example, I think, because there's a guy that became the object of interest for the entire internet, and yeah, you saw how because he was such a phenomenon. You had people interacting with him, and all the weird, perverse things that people convinced him to do. That you're right, canary in the coal mine, because you saw how the internet
Shaped him,
pressed itself upon him. Yeah,
and then how
exactly.
he
Shaped him.
shaped the
So
internet.
right. So
It,
if you fall behind on the stuff, you can really struggle in your own. I think that's a problem with people that insulate themselves too much. I think it's good to have a ascetic lifestyle where you are relatively insulated. Um, but what do you do if your homeschooled kids suddenly get exposed to some other kid who just has internet porn lined up on his phone? Like it's very difficult at this stage, at least, to completely insulate. They have to. It's not like you're going to expose them to porn, like that's not something like that. But they need to understand the landscape, to know that this is how it's caught people up, right? So there's a sort of education required, so that you can uh, be that settler that doesn't get swept up in the rapids. You know where the rapids are, so now you know how to cross them properly.
you know how to fight off a savage. You know how to make peace and smoke peace pipe with a savage. You know how to build a canoe. You know how to make pemmican. All this stuff. I'm sure those all have good analogies I could find, but on the
Yeah.
internet. But
No, there's also another really easy one is just not getting mad online,
hmm,
right? If you're out and you're just losing it at every negative comment you see. It doesn't even have to be directed at you. You see this all the time. Um, some content pops up and then it pisses you off, or it pisses the person off, and they go and they make you again. You become that locale. It's very easy to just be the butt of the joke if you don't get how to. We kind of talked about this way at the beginning, the internet etiquette. If you don't really understand those underlying rules, then you struggle to be in the mix.
um, for anyone wondering, if you see anything that makes you mad, instead of being performatively mad with a text thing, what you do is you go find a pink Wojak and you post that under there.
Yeah, I mean that's part of it too, is knowing what images facilitate a certain response, um, to a given interaction online.
I'm so bad at it. I'm just an hair too old to be really good at this, you know. Uh, and
Some
so
of these
I
Zoomer kids
often
are,
I often choose the wrong reaction image and then regret it, and then
yeah,
have to then everyone thinks I feel differently about stuff than I do. But I put the few peppy. I'm not feeling relief. I was actually trying to indicate that I'm ashamed. I well, now everyone thinks I'm relieved that that orphanage got bombed and I look like a monster. It happens to me on a daily basis.
yeah, that's awful. It's like, well, it's I know you're joking with it, but it's like when someone you see someone posting with their dead grandma on Facebook, and the person puts the laughing crying emoji. And they
Yes.
like an old lady doesn't understand the
Yes.
difference between the laughing crying and the actual crying.
Right.
Again, another example of
Thank God we
not
managed to
understanding
like
the.
quarantine all the old people onto Facebook. They're safe
Yeah,
there. They can only hurt each other.
yeah, they got to stay in that containment, because outside,
Ooh.
it's like they you kept your grandparents back home in France or in Britain before. You didn't
Yeah.
want them to come be exposed to the.
Or even if they'd stay in Montreal, they weren't coming out to
Yeah,
Fort Saint John with
even
you.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And then even still, I about once every couple months, I get like a flurry of phone messages from an elderly relative who's gotten in some terrible Facebook fight and wants to know what to say. Well, I was like, you don't want to know what I would say. I was like, why are you can't do anything? You can't say anything because you're using your real face. You made your first mistake there. You should be an anonymous demon troll rat like me. Then you can say whatever you want.
Yeah, that's the other thing they don't get is the distinction. How easy it is to turn yourself if you're in the using your same flesh online, like you just that presents a whole other series of problems, and they just don't quite get how that all maps out.
I with because we're friends with some quote unquote face fags. I've always felt this way. If you're using your real face, is to bring your real life clout onto the internet, and that's fine. If you got real life clout you want to bring onto the internet, and at your own risk. Just like if you were to use an internet name in real life, it'd be to bring your internet clout into real life. I don't know that one is actually preferable than the other. It's just you can't burn your real face off unless well, no, never mind unless. Just don't do that.
What about in Face Off?
Right. Or I was thinking of that monk doing the protest.
Oh yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah, that was savage. Posting few peppy right now to indicate shame. um, no, I don't know. Like, I don't like when people try and bring. I think people posture one way or the other about either anonymity or face fagging,
What they do,
and
and
it's
I think
always
the
for
issue
their
that
own
people run
agenda.
into,
Like, and
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's always someone that is, well, they leverage their anonymity to present themselves as much different than they actually are. Right there, they basically built themselves an online persona that doesn't exist anywhere except online.
mhm.
That's what the one aspect of that.
But that's like,
And
yeah,
on that note, that's just another one of those pitfalls that people run into, where you get scammed by someone selling you a false lifestyle they don't actually live, and
right.
you get worked up into the aesthetics that some guys made from his persona, and then it turns out, well, that
Is
wasn't a real thing.
right.
He wasn't an expert, and now you've devoted so much time into this particular aesthetic, and it's taking you nowhere because it wasn't ever a real thing.
That Lamborghini was rented all along. Who would have seen that
Yeah,
coming?
exactly.
Why did I give all my life savings to FTX? Joke's on you, world. I've never had any money to waste.
Boom, owned.
Owned. Um, yeah. No, I think anonymity is the way of the future on the internet because I think disposable personalities are a feature. I think it's good that if you really
Well,
mess up, that you can just like I could burn NPNP, delete all the accounts, and then come back and try again as a new person.
yeah,
Maybe not
well,
making the
people
same
do that all the
mistakes.
time. And that was, as far as I know, I mean, I wasn't really on the internet at all in the early days, but that's what it was originally, was it not?
No,
All
it
anonymous.
was okay. On your BBS boards, I think you did have a handle, and then people grew quite
Hmm.
attached to them because they'd usually be talking to the same people. But you could hypothetically and easily just make a new one. And that was sort of the norm. And then in sort of the golden age of the anonymous, like early internet, your Newgrounds, 4chan, something awful kind of days, then there was very little identity associated with your accounts. And that carries forward to like Reddit, where I guess you have a name, but no one really knows who anyone is.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, and then when phones were invented, women, of course, don't like not having any attention and wanted to bring all their real world clout with them. So, the Facebook like sites blew up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that was a guy thing too. Like, I think a lot of guys, like, it was male and female. It was
Okay, but there
both
weren't
sides,
women
definitely.
on the internet previous to that.
That's Yeah, you
in
probably.
any number worth mentioning.
Um, I think now I don't have enough. I don't have enough info to say much about this, but I think Jack Dorsey was supposed to be. Do you see this having a new app?
Yeah, it looks like it, and it looks like it's
That
really
was
it's based around some good principles.
Yeah, this app. The app's promise is an open social network without any central authority that makes decisions about the network's content or who's allowed to participate. In contrast to what Facebook and Twitter do. Instead, he explains that the app's homepage. Instead it explains the app's homepage that you are in control. There is no platform that can ban or censor you. You are in control of your data. And encryption, no sign up with phone or email, and it's called Noster, or I guess Damus, Nostradamus, basically. Um,
Mm,
so that I mean that
I
sounds
like
like
it.
the it sounds ideal.
I like the
Now, how
pitch.
that actually manifests, but it sounds exactly like what I mean. Our whole conversation was just pointing at is where the resurgence in the internet is aiming at. So who knows what that looks like, but promising.
Right on. Well, uh, to finish it off, I, is it okay if I point out that poet I found the other day when I was looking for
Yeah,
Canadian
go for it.
poets? I didn't want to put this at the front of the show or highlight it or anything because it's, I think, Canada's worst poet. It's a Hungarian immigrant from like the 1950s, and he's everything you'd expect him to be. I'll try and find.
Yeah, this is pretty cringe, honestly.
Okay, this is a verse of poetry, mind you, by Paul Hartel. This one's from, I'm just picking it at random because they're all bad, Samurai Competition. The Tokyo paper also claimed that the two officers decided to start another competition with the aim being 150 severed heads. During the fascist invasion of China in the World War II, soldiers of the Japanese Imperial Army treated people in the occupied territories as inferior lower classes and slaves. It goes on like that. He's not actually Canadian, he's Hungarian, I checked. And I would actually sort of doubt he's Hungarian, if you catch my drift.
Like I'm picking up what you're putting down. I just that kind of I don't like. I get there's poetry that can be, on something sad or like
Oh, it should,
a
no.
low point in human action. Like that's an aspect, but this is just like, hey, look at these bad things that happen. Like there's nothing really poetic about it. It's just this is this is bad.
The one I
Do you see
sent to
how
you
bad
before
this is?
was making fun of Hitler's paintings, and
Yeah,
if I can find it again here. I guess it's called lyrical conceptualism is a style, and it's supposed to be trying to blend science and poetry, and it's really bad. It's just
like I'm not
god awful.
not really a huge reactionary against different unique styles of old forms, but
No, this one's bad
like I
though.
said, there's nothing inspirational or there's no emotion, no feeling to any of it. It's just like I said, wow,
All right,
this is something I don't like. I'll look at it. Look at this thing I don't like. It's
here's
bad.
another verse from Paul Hartel. The dictator confiscated the right to see the world in a different way than he saw it. An ignoramus, Hitler was evidently unaware of the stunning color phenomena of nature. He did not know or ignored that oftentimes, before violent thunderstorms strike, the sky does display hues of green in the visible electromagnetic spectrum with a wavelength of about 510 nanometers. And if I could do that in Neil deGrasse Tyson's voice, I
Did he
would.
actually Did he actually say what the wavelength was?
Yes,
That's actually in the
510
poem.
nanometers is green, I guess.
No way,
Yeah.
man. There's something so ironic about calling someone colorless and lame and reducing the color of the world to its wavelength. Like they're like
He tries to actually Hitler on like a poetic kind of sentiment with a scientific materialist description of a weather phenomena.
Yeah, like
The guy's a
how does
moron.
that play? Like you're trying to say that like, oh, the real beauty is out there, and then you just reduce the real beauty to its atoms and wavelengths.
Actually, did
Good
you
job,
know
man.
the
You made
ground
it.
can be
You,
purple in certain cases of
you,
iodine rain near a
it's like
volcanic eruption?
this is this is Lex Friedman tier thinking here.
Yes, yes. This was Friedman in his previous life, I'm almost sure. Or Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's hard to say which.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. Wow. Did you know Santa is not cannot possibly get around the
Charles,
world?
did you know if you kiss a mirror, you can only kiss yourself on the lips?
Okay, that's yeah.
Uh, I hate that guy so much.
It just I just find it so funny that people think like there's people out there like this that think, well, look at all this evil and bad in the world and these colorless, colorless dictators and tyrants, and they just present you the tyranny of material blandness. There's nothing magic in that. There's nothing there's nothing bright in a scientific worldview. It just reduces everything to atoms.
It's
Cool,
not
man.
even fun. It doesn't, like, okay, I like Robert's. I've
Yeah,
been posting a lot of Robert Service, and you can call it doggerel. It's like so down to earth and rhymey and whatever. It wasn't cool even at the time. It was kind of folksy and uh, parochial, no, but provincial. Uh, I, it's at least it rhymes. It's more fun. It's better.
yeah. Well, and you could even take that scientific stuff and turn it into something bright and colorful. Like, yeah, look at kid being fascinated with the Mentos and Coke or something. But no,
Sure,
these people just have to make it lame.
sure.
They suck. They suck.
Well, that's good. Yeah, we can highlight the good Canadian poets if we. I'll keep highlighting the bad ones as I come across them because I find it quite amusing. Bad poetry is perennially funny.
It is funny. But yeah, I think you were posting a bunch of uh, Lieutenant Colonel Sir John
Lieutenant
Alexander Gray.
Colonel Doctor. Yes,
Doctor, yes, yes.
yes, I really love his
That's good
stuff.
stuff to see.
Although the one I
Yeah,
posted,
we.
Anarchy, is
Mhm.
I gotta say it's a little bit derivative of Percy Shelley's Anarchy. In,
Interesting.
but I mean, I think stylistically better. But as far as content goes, it brings up a lot of the same points. I guess I won't call that a criticism. I'll call that a nice link across time between two very good
Yeah,
poets.
yeah, an ode maybe.
Yeah. Also, he wrote that one when he was very young.
All right. Well, I think that's all we got for today then, hey?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. Well, good stuff. I guess like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.
Good night.